Welcome to Both Sides of Beehives. I'm Beth Arts-Ives, and I'm really glad you're here. We are going to start from the very beginning. I had to fly from Toronto to Halifax, and the way that I got there is I Ubered from my home to Union Station, and then I took the UP Express from Union Station to the airport. And that was a strategic, intentional decision on my part because I'm always thinking about how can I conserve my energy, my points, my spoons, how can I get the most bang for my buck? And so I decided that it was going to be quicker to Uber from my house to Union than taking the subway that day, and that was going to be worthwhile, but that Ubering all the way from my house to the airport was going to be both expensive, but probably take the same amount of time as it would to transit. And I get much more sick in Ubers than on public transit as a general rule. And I took my anti-nausea medication even before I left the house. I find for me taking it preventatively goes a really long way and helps prevent some of the most significant nausea symptoms from entering the chat to begin with. I'm still working on asking strangers for what I need. I find it easier to ask my family and friends in a lot of situations. And so when I got on the UP Express, which is a train from Union to the airport, I didn't ask people for their seat so that I could sit down. I'd sort of forgot that I was going at rush hour, and a lot of folks use it as a way to commute from work to home. And so it was incredibly busy, which I hadn't exactly counted on, but I did have my green lanyard with my yellow sunflowers on it and my please offer me a seat accessibility pin, which is something that I wear whenever I am transiting because it lets people know that I'm someone who needs a seat, even though it might not look at first glance like I could use that. And so I wasn't feeling brave enough or confident enough in that moment to ask someone to give up their seat. And I was secretly hoping that if someone saw my pin, maybe they would offer it to me. But at this part of my trip, I was feeling fairly okay. I had seen a couple of clients earlier in the day. I had then rested and made sure I was well fed and well watered and had the points that I could to do this trip. And so having to stand for the 20 minutes or so, even though it was more rocky, it also kind of felt good after sitting for most of the day. And so even though I should have probably asked for that accommodation, it wasn't the worst trade-off that I didn't. Once I got to the airport, my green lanyard with the yellow sunflowers also signals to airport staff that I have a disability and could use certain accommodations. So that allows folks to be able to use a certain security line that is just for people who have disabilities. It tends to be for folks who have kids as well, or elderly folks who might just need a little bit more time and patience. And so I opted to use that line this time just to see what it would be like. And they were very helpful. They asked me if I needed any help with anything. I think they would have helped me put my items into the bins and push them along if that was something that I wanted support. I am someone that has an extra security clearance and have Nexus. And so in my case, I think using the Nexus line would have been more efficient for me because I could have kept my shoes on, I could have kept my jacket on, I wouldn't have had to take my laptop and liquids out of my bags. And so that is something that I used on the way home because that was just better for me. But for folks who don't have that, I was really impressed with using the accessibility line. And you can get those lanyards in the airport by asking one of the volunteers. They might have them on them. Or I'm pretty sure you could order it in advance, or even just get one from the dollar store, but the yellow sunflowers are the thing that signals to airport staff that you could use some extra time and support. And my newest trick is making sure I consume enough salt before I travel. As someone who struggles with POTS and low blood pressure, making sure that I'm getting enough sodium so that the water and electrolytes are working together is really important. And so my current thing is getting pickles on road trips and in the airport, as I love the taste of them and I enjoy it and it kind of makes me laugh. But most importantly, I find that having the salt and sodium goes a really long way for setting me up for success. So I try and prioritize that, or salted nuts or chips. I otherwise don't eat too much before I travel. I find that as someone who is most likely to vomit on a plane, it is best for me to have a little bit in my stomach, but not to have too much. And so I will normally have my breakfast in the morning when I typically would, and maybe snack a little bit, but I'm certainly not having a full meal. And I'll have some snacks in my bag. That way, if I'm hungry on the plane, I can nibble on things, but it's actually best for me to land fairly hungry. But it's certainly a balance, because I don't want to be so hungry that I'm not able to think right, or that that's something that is working against me. What I have found to be helpful recently is most of the time I'm traveling with carry-on only, and what I have been doing is checking my bag at the gate if they ask folks if anyone would volunteer to have their suitcase or their belongings to go underneath of the plane. And I find that to be helpful because I don't have to reach up and put my suitcase above my head in the overhead bins or get it down, which can be challenging, especially at the end of the flight when I'm not feeling well. And because I've had so many concussions, including some on a plane, I'm trying to reduce the odds that I am having anything above my head and putting me into a situation like that. And so most of the time they're looking for people to check their bags at the gate, especially with so many other folks doing carry-on only. And so I went up to the gate person and I said that I was interested in checking my bag. And so they put a tag on it and told me I just needed to walk it down to right before I get on the plane, and someone would take it for me. And then it would be on the carousel at the end of my flight once I got to the airport. As I said earlier in the video, I am also practicing accommodating myself and asking for what I need. And so in this situation, I did not ask for accommodations at the gate, but because I was wearing my lanyard, the gate agent asked me if I would benefit from boarding the flight earlier and having a little bit more time to get settled before everyone else came on. And that was something that I took them up on, and I felt very confident asking for that once it was offered to me. And it's something that I have done now on my way back, and I did just ask them when they signaled if anyone had children or disabilities or could use a little bit more time before boarding the plane. I have accepted that that goes a long way for me, and it's less standing and waiting in line. It tends to feel a little bit less rushed, especially because anytime I'm frantic, I find that my points or my spoons get depleted a lot quicker. Once I'm on the plane, one of the first things that I do is check to see if there's a puke bag in my seat. It gives me a lot of peace of mind, especially because I am likely enough to puke on the plane from my nausea and from my various disabilities. Just knowing it's there goes a long way for me, and knowing that if I become really unwell, I'm not having to look for it on top of feeling really sick. And so that is something that I do. I also tend to get the window seat because I find I have a little bit more room to prop up my pillows, to take off different layers. I try and wear a lot of different clothes that I can put on or take off based on my temperature. Like a lot of people, the warmer I am, the more nausea prone I am, especially when you're on a stuffy flight. And so I try to have tank tops and shorts, but I might also have pants and jackets and sweaters as well. And so having that extra room between me and the wall where I can shove those extra items and make sure that I remember them, ideally, I find to be really useful. And for other folks, maybe being on the aisle would be easier, but as someone who does best on the plane when I am out cold, not having to get up for other folks so they can go to the washroom, kind of being left alone goes a long way. And so that is my preference whenever I can. During the actual flight, I have my headphones, I have my ball cap to keep out some of the light. Some people find wearing an eye mask can go a long way. I find it fairly uncomfortable on my head, so that's not something I often do, but it is an option that works for a lot of people. I also make sure that I have earplugs with me if I'm not going to be listening to music, but I find that to be my best bet. and I put it as loud as I can to really eliminate any other stimulations or the noises from the plane, which might be anxiety provoking for me. And I tend to listen to music, or I might watch one of my comfort shows, a movie that I've seen a number of times, or download YouTube videos that I find really comforting, mainly because I'm not going to be able to watch the actual movie or TV show, and so I want it to be something that I'm really familiar with. I'm not going to find myself looking down trying to see what's going on because I'm mainly going to be hearing it. But I have found the volume to be one of the biggest factors for me. It's as loud as I can tolerate without it bothering the people beside me. I now travel with my own pillow. I find having that item that I have done lots of research and trial and error to find that feels the most comfortable for my body. Being able to bring it with me is definitely worth it. And I think it depends on the person and how malleable their pillow is, or how light or heavy they are traveling. But for me, I won't go anywhere without it anymore. And it's compact enough that I can put it in my backpack, even though it takes up a lot of room. But it does have enough structure to it that I find I can put it on my chest and put it under my chin, and it helps prop my neck up in a way that feels really supportive, and it also prevents me from slouching or getting into a weird position in order to sleep or to feel comfortable, which will cause me a lot of pain after the flight. So I'm always trying to think of what will be good for me in this moment, what will help future Beth out. And sometimes it's more one than the other, but in this case, I find it to be really useful. I also wear my compression socks to help with circulation, especially because I'm really prone to my legs falling asleep, and the pins and needles feeling is not great for anyone, but only adds to feeling trapped and stuck and out of control in my body. And because I don't have additional energy reserves to tap into, it's best to use the same amount of points or energy, or expect the same amount of myself on a travel day as I would on a regular day. And so I'm trying to be conscientious of my schedule and what time flying out would be best for me as well. The other couple items that I am mindful of motion sickness wise is I put on my C-bands, so they're wristbands that go on the pressure points on my wrists. I don't know if they are actually effective or it's placebo, but honestly, I don't care which one it is. It is something that I can do to help myself. As I said earlier, mouthfeel is something that goes a long way for me, especially as someone who has a really heightened sense of smell and taste when I'm in a flare. And so I try and think about what tastes will feel good in my mouth. And so peppermint, cinnamon, chocolate, peanut butter. Sometimes also bring nose plugs with me if I can't distract myself or separate the smells that I'm experiencing and it's becoming too overwhelming. I also sometimes will use peppermint halo and put it under my nose so that that's something that my brain is taking in as information versus all of the other smells on the plane. But I like to remind folks to be cognizant of when they are putting it on, because something that might be a comforting, reassuring smell for us might be something that is really triggering or overwhelming for someone else, especially when we're all stuck on a really small plane. I also tend to rely on biofeedback, which to me means taking in information about my body and trying to be responsive to it. So my heart rate tends to be a pretty good indicator of my stress level and how my nervous system and physical body is doing. And so when I'm traveling, I'll look at my Oura Ring or use my smartwatch to see what is my heart rate at. Do I need to sit down? Do I need to drink some water? Do I need to ask for some support in this moment just so I can regulate myself? Maybe do some deep breathing, maybe watch one of my comfort shows to distract my brain, just to help bring me back down to my normal. I hope this gave you some ideas of how you can accommodate yourself in small ways, but also for larger adventures that might feel really daunting. And starting to think outside the box and think about what you need, how other people around you can set you up for success, and how you can access some of those accommodations, even if it's dipping your toe in the water or practicing some of these things in really smaller ways and working your way up to bigger plans.